We are presenting Jim Gasperini, who is a member of the board and our webmaster, who has been writing Fire in the Imagination from the Burning Bush to Burning Man for several years now, and the writers group has been, I hope, heavily and well involved in that process. So we're going to talk about what makes fire so central to ritual practice. And without further ado, I will mute myself and turn the microphone over to Jim.
Okay, so let's get in the mood with by starting this entering into a shared contemplation with a little fire ritual. I'm going to light this candle. Let me get this going. And oh, I blew it out. Oh gosh.
For safety's sake, I'm going to use my little electronic candle for this little.
Oh, not everybody has to do it. Oh, I'm just doing it myself. So, though you won't see this again until I extinguish it at the end, the warm reddish light of this candle, witness to countless ceremonies past, will witness our mutual effort to achieve greater understanding of the world through the bluish tinted light of our computer screens. I will now invoke the god of fire using the first hymn of the Rig Veda. O Agni, you who gleam in the darkness, to you we come day by day with devotion and bearing homage. To you, ruler of the sacrifices, keeper of the cosmic law, brightly shining, growing in your abode, be of easy access to us, Agni, as a father to his son. Abide with us for our well-being. And with that, I will share my screen. Okay, so as Dan mentioned, this is excerpts from my book in progress. Well, it's written, but I'm working on getting it published. Is the next big challenge. So 'tis the season to light fires. We're entering the season where people in some households will be lighting the Hannukah candle. I'm going clockwise here. We don't see the real Yule logs anymore, but because back in the day when we had large fireplaces, kind of like around this area, we have one at the Pelican Inn is about large enough to this, but they used to find the largest log they could find out in the woods and drag it with some ceremony with kids writing it and festooned with ribbons in to be the Yule log at the fireplace. And on the top right, we have some Dutch children admiring candles on a Christmas tree, a practice that has a lot of danger. I had a friend who, out of nostalgia, used to decorate her tree this way and managed to blow out her apartment on Central Park South because the tree exploded. He left it too long. Bottom right, we have an Advent candle. Every week, a new candle is added to those that are lit as we approach Christmas. And then we have the Kinara of Kwanz'aa, a tradition that began after the Watts riots in Los Angeles, and each candle is lit a day before the big ceremony. Each candle represents a different aspect of the African-American diaspora and tradition. The one bottom left will probably not be familiar to most of you, but this is a ceremony that we do at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley every Christmas Eve. Each member of the congregation lights a candle and places it on these giant racks here. It's quite a beautiful thing. You want to think of coming by. But those are most of those are somewhat familiar, but we have midwinter fire festivals all over the world. One of the oldest is, which actually goes back to before the Romans in a small village in southern Italy, back to the Samnite tribe that were eventually overtaken by the Romans. But they kept their festival, and it's now, they say it's the largest in Europe, although there are others that claim that. And we have in Japan, the Oniyo ceremony has been performed for the last 1600 years. On New Year's Eve, an Oniyo, or devil fire, is lit and guards the shrine for 7 days. On the night of January 7th, the devil fire is used to light 6 massive torches, almost 45 feet tall. These get carried around the shrine by men wearing traditional 𝘗𝘩𝘦𝘰𝘳𝘦 loincloths. As the torches wander around, those onto whom the ember falls will be blessed with good luck. And in Antigua, Guatemala, since colonial days, we've had a large wooden statue of the devil is burnt every December 7th to expunge the bad from the previous year and start anew. The common theme of these fire rituals. These are from 2 different years. In Bulgaria, we have an ancient folk tradition that uses mask, ritual dances, and fire to celebrate the new year and chase evil away. And up Helly Aa in the Shetland Islands, 1800s, 1880s, a torchlit procession of costumed geysers, and that's as in, I believe, disguisers, culminates in the burning of a replica of a Viking longship. Up Holy Day All is what up Helly Aa, the local dialect. So, what is ritual? There's a surprisingly varied range of answers from anthropologists, scholars of religion, and others. One that's quite broad by scholar Walter Burkert. He just defines it as fixed behavioral patterns marked by exaggeration and repetition, and often characterized by obsessive seriousness. Ritual reflects a pre-verbal form of communication to be learned by imitation and to be understood by its function. And pre-verbal is quite accurate, and in fact, fire rituals predate language. Early hominins, we think it's began either with Homo erectus or even earlier. Fire rituals were developed in order to keep the crucial fire alive. It was very important for each little group of proto-humans and then humans to keep the fire. Once they discovered fire out in the savannah, they would keep it alive as long as they could. And but that began the division of labor. Some people had to go out to find firewood while others kept the fire going, which spurred cognitive and social development. One had to have what's called a sense that the other exists, and a presence of mind, sense of other minds are doing something. I know that you are out there doing one thing while I'm doing this here, even though I can't see you. Mm. So there are many purposes of fire rituals. There's rituals for survival, protection, appeal, purification, obliteration, intimidation, and subduing adversaries, rituals of protest, rituals of possession and triumph, blessing and strengthening, rituals for healing, rites of passage, we'll talk quite a bit about, rituals that set apart a sacred space and time. I wonder if you could have somebody muted here. Anyway, ceremonies of celebration and commemoration, and rituals, grand rituals for perpetuating the world. We'll touch on each one of these in turn. The difference between ritual and ceremony is quite fluid. Some terms overlap and are sometimes used interchangeably. One of the most grandest rituals we'll talk about, the Mexica or Aztec fire ceremony, is very much a ritual, but a distinction that I like, because it's nice and simple and is useful, is that a ceremony may simply celebrate something or mark it as significant. We have a birthday cake, has candles on it, and that says, okay, we have a birthday girl and she's turns 7 years old or whatever she is, and we're marking this birthday and celebrating her. A ritual, by contrast, is intended to make something happen, to control the world in some way. There's some degree of efficacy. So when the birthday girl blows out the candles with the idea that in doing so, she will make her wish come true, that is a lighthearted ritual of sorts. So rituals of appeal, we have votive candles at roadside grotto in North Texas here. Votive candles express the prayers of worshipers to light them. In Western churches, they often ask for the intercession of a saint. In Eastern Orthodox churches, they directly address Jesus or his mother Mary. Such offerings may fulfill a vow. Votive derives from the Latin for to vow. Candles may also represent an offering of wax or fat, often equated with the life substance. A similar practice in the Far East usually uses incense. In popular religion, most incense joss sticks, joss is a pidgin term that evolved from the Latin deus when the Portuguese arrived in China. They usually have little or no scent, since the smoke is more important in carrying prayers to heaven. So rituals for protection. In German-speaking areas, bonfires burned on Hexenacht, witches' night, when witches were believed to have unusually potent powers. God willing, fires rituals could diminish the power of their spells and stop more disastrous fires from destroying crops, homes, or towns. Under Christianity, this became Walpurgisnacht, named for Saint Walpurga, an 8th century Christian missionary famous for curing people with the effects of witchery. The pagan summer solstice festival 𝘍𝘪, also celebrated with leaping over bonfires and rolling flaming wheels down hills, instead came to honor St. John the Baptist, or John Cupola. So, let's see, we have, to protect their cattle from natural and supernatural harm, herders often walk them around a bonfire, perhaps from, the term may come from bane fire, according to one etymology, or between two bonfires. Purifying need fires could also be lit in response to an outbreak of disease or other calamity. The practice of protecting animals with bonfires lives on in the Spanish village of San Bartolomé de Pinares. Each year, since an equine epidemic in the 18th century, villagers gallop horses through the bonfires on the night before the feast of St. Anthony, the patron saint of animals. And on the on the right here, we have, what do we have? Okay. A portrait of an 𝘗𝘗𝘢𝘵, which burning in Bali every year at New Year's time, the villagers will create these grotesque figures representing their fears and their the bad things that have happened in the past year, and they will burn the figures with the hope of being rid of them once and for all. And we have rituals of obliteration, intimidation, and subduing adversaries. We have Nazi students as an example, publicly burning un-German books in Berlin in, I believe, about 1938. And that still goes on in places like Nashville, Tennessee, where I think they're burning Harry Potter books there as an example of works of the devil. Have rituals of protest. I think most of us on this Zoom call will probably remember young men burning their draft cards during the Vietnam War, and the terribly striking images of the self-immolation of Buddhist monks. This is the first one in 1963, protesting the persecution of Buddhists by the South Vietnamese government. And we have rituals of possession and triumph. As Indo-European nomads gradually pushed east into the Indus Valley, and 3,000 years ago, they cemented each new triumph with the Kayana, with the piling up of Agni, an elaborate 12-day ritual. The creation of an altar to Agni in Vedic times constituted legal declaration of ownership of territory. Still ceremonially performed from time to time by a hereditary group of Brahmin in Kerala, the Agnikayana requires the creation of a giant altar, more than 1,000 bricks, in the shape of a giant bird of prey. This shape may derive from an ancient myth telling how fire was brought from heaven by a bird. And there are many other examples of similar use of fire to establish possession during the early settlement of Iceland. In the newly settled territory, a man carried a torch around as much land as he could encircle in a single day. And we have rituals for blessing and strengthening, sort of modern pagan candle rituals on the left, and then two kinds of arti at on the banks of the Ganges. An arti performed during almost all Hindu rituals. An arti lamp lit with camphor, ghee, or oil represents the divine power. Devotees may wave the lamp in the air, as these young men are doing, or cup down hands can be opened over the flame. In the front we have a more personal kind of arti. This family has its own burning fire, and they will sort of cup the effects of the fire and bring the effects of the fire towards them, and it's a classic gesture of a personal arti. Rituals for healing. On the principle of like affects like, folk medicine often tries to use fire to fight fire. When a child of Russian peasants broke out in a scrofulous rash with fiery appearance, the mother would carry the child to the stove, ignite a rag from the hearth fire, smother the rag in lard, and then apply the rag to the rash, saying, "Fire, fire, take your little fire." And here on the right, we have a dance of the San people of South Africa using a ceremony to expel star sickness. Celebrations of celebration and commemoration. We have in the Persian tradition, and also as in Azerbaijan, there's a tradition to leap over fires on Nowruz, the spring festival. That's something you can still see in front of the Persian Cultural Center here in Berkeley. Every spring, they'll sit out and they'll block off a street and set up a series of bonfires, and people will leap over them. In the Jewish tradition, a yahrzeit candle is typically lit on the anniversary of some loved one's death. It can be, as this example, in a box by a grave, or it could just be at home. The point is to remember somebody with a candle in their memory. Rites of passage. So here we have several examples. Just about every time when a human being goes from one stage to another, somewhere in the world there's a fire ritual that goes with it. We have in New Guinea fire dancers are celebrating the birth of a child, and many of the samskara rites of Hinduism involve sacred fire, yajna. In the Sapardi wedding ritual, as the bride and groom circle fire 7 times, Agni witnesses and blesses their union. And through the last sacrifice funeral ritual, the body returns to the elements and the soul to its immortal organs. Agni, the god of fire, prepares the corpse by cooking it, releasing the soul to the gods and reducing the body to ashes and bones that can be dispersed in a nearby river. And in Bali, they do a massive ceremony involving the corpses of a lot of people all at once in these beautiful towers and mythical beasts that are different every year. So the term rites of passage was invented by Arnold van Gennep and then elaborated by anthropologist Victor Turner. He brought the term of rites of passage to prominence and popular attention. Studying the initiation rites among the Ndubu of Zambia, he identified a sacred liminal realm set apart from the ordinary world of ritual process through which initiates temporarily pass. From the Latin for threshold, liminal marks the ambiguous middle stage of such rituals when participants are no longer what they were before, no longer boys, in the case of Hindu, but have not yet reached the status they will attain. They're not yet men when the rite completes. While in this dangerous liminal state, no longer children, but not yet fully adult, novices must pass difficult tests, often involving fire, before a ritual of reincorporation signals their return to the ordinary world, transformed into adults. And studying his own culture, Turner found a similar structure in such events as pilgrimages, theater, and festivals. The stakes for participants are rarely as dramatic as those facing Naboo boys in their initiation into manhood, and the steps not always so clear, but his three-stage pattern has become a standard template for analyzing and understanding ritual behavior. Studying the Burning Man Festival, anthropologist Lee Gilmore saw a classic example of Turner's three-stage ritual structure. Participants view the event as transgressive, marginal, and otherworldly space for countercultural resistance, enabling them to peel away layers of default cultural messages and constructions of identity. Temporarily inhabiting the liminal world of the festival enables the construction of more authentic identities than the ones they inhabit in what burners call the default world, which is the world that you and I are sitting in right now. Once you start looking for this pattern, you can find it everywhere in the Unitarian Universalist tradition that I'm a part of. Every service and often just board meetings and other gatherings are start with the lighting of a chalice that signifies that now we're entering a sacred space or a meeting space or something. It's something different from the ordinary. And then at the end of the event, the service or the meeting, this chalice will be extinguished to signify that we're back in the real normal world. And let's see, the 1,000-year-old Chinese custom of burning paper money for the use of deceased relatives also moves through a three-part ritual structure. Diyu, the Chinese afterlife, is conceived as a hellish bureaucracy. Dead souls are thought to need money to bribe officials or purchase useful things. Out of love and filial piety, their relatives transmit necessary items to the afterlife by burning them. Fire affects the sublimation of worldly materials, including fake paper money, into a spiritual form that maintains their value and function in the afterworld. Fire appears at each stage of this ritual of transformation from the material to the spiritual. So why is fire central to so many rituals? It transforms any activity into something more significant. As we mentioned earlier, bringing a cake to the dinner table will typically trigger delight and anticipation of a sugary treat. But if you top the cake with burning candles, that signals something else. Another year of life has passed and the time has come to celebrate someone in particular. My phrase for this is, we indicate with fire that now we take actions with serious intent, and not terribly serious in the case of a birthday cake, but it can be quite serious in other contexts. So part of my fire's mystery draws from its uncanny relatedness to us living creatures, fellow consumers of organic fuel. Fire draws its energy from life. Something that had once been alive transforms before our eyes into heat, light, and ash. A burning log displays the life force concentrated, sped up, and unspooled like a time-lapse film running in reverse. A tree may have spent 50 or 100 years accumulating the energy stored in a log. Then, in an hour, fire transforms all that energy into heat, gas, and ash before our eyes. There's a finality to it, a speeding up of time, a touch of danger, and more than a little mystery. Life, the slow controlled combustion in living cells burned for 1 billion years on Earth before a second rapid form of combustion first appeared on the planet. Fire can therefore be considered life's hot-headed younger sibling. Many cultures consider fire to be a living being, and the behavior of fire resembles that of a life in many ways. Fire is less like an alien life form, though, than like a strange, distant relative, a being whose behavior seems both unfathomably dissimilar and uncannily familiar. Familiar as in one of the family, someone whose kinship we might try to deny but must ultimately acknowledge. Though fire never appears on charts of the family tree of life, it lurks there, a non-living relation. So how did this distant kinship to living beings affect our thinking about fire? For one thing, it tempted us to think of fire as an intermediary between ourselves and the mysterious powers that control the world. Having achieved partial control over one mysterious force, perhaps we could leverage that control into a means for understanding the deeper mysteries of the universe, even achieve partial control over the powerful forces that confused and confounded us. By performing specified forms of fiery sacrifice, Moses taught his people, the God of the Israelites could be induced to speak through fire and smoke at the top of a sacred wooden cabinet, the Ark of the Covenant, inside a special tent. The answers to important questions in other traditions, soothsayers told those could be divined from the behavior of herbs tossed into a fire, the marks fire leaves on the scapula of sacrificial sheep, or cracks that form in turtle plastrons when touched with a red-hot iron. That's in the ancient Chinese tradition. Fire has always been the dynamic, ever-changing nature of fire inspired ancient cultures from Mesoamerica to Greece to India to view it as the essence of transformation. Shiva's dance in the Ring of Fire recognizes the creation of life anew in the destruction of the old. Here, flamed by a flaming halo, the god holds the drum that made the first sounds of the creation in his upper right hand, and the fire that will destroy the universe in his upper left hand. Fire and dance together symbolize the alternating forces of chaos and order moving together through endless cycles of creation and destruction. So eternal flames, most of us will think of the term eternal flames in terms of the memorial flames that became popular in the middle of the 20th century. Here we see one of the first, which burns by the French tomb of the unknown soldier in Paris. There are now flames burning next to monuments to unknown soldiers in 12 European nations. And of the over 180 ceremonial flames burning around the world, about half honor fallen soldiers, all war veterans, all victims of war or notable war victories. There's a lot more to be said about eternal flames, but I actually a couple of years ago gave an entire talk about that, so I won't go too much more into that. The potential lifespan of a well-tended fire is longer than that of any human being, much longer. By keeping a fire burning, a community can maintain a vibrant, animated link to its past and to its future. In days when keeping the fire alive was a constant practice, children learned to keep the same fire their ancestor tended, to take over the responsibilities for tending it as adults, and then passed on that responsibility to their own children. The superhuman longevity of fire likely inspired the idea that ancestors live on in fires that once tended. The practice of honoring ancestors with ever-burning fires continues in many cultures, even where there's no longer an open hearth. In Chinese traditional religion, families keep a set of spirit tablets on an ancestral altar arranged in hierarchical order. A lamp or candle burns beside the tablets, never extinguished, symbolizing the continuing presence of the ancestors. The culture that places and the religion that places the greatest emphasis on the continuity of fire is keeping it eternally burning is the Zoroastrians. For Zoroastrians, eternal life is the living, fire is a living, energetic manifestation of the presence of the supreme creator, Ahura Mazda. Parts of the daily Zoroastrian prayer always said before a fire may date to the veneration of fire among the Indo-Europeans. At one point, the fire itself speaks to all those for whom it cooks the evening and morning meal. Looking out at the hands of all who pass by, it blesses them. May a herd of cattle attend you, a multitude of men. May an active mind attend you, an active spirit. May you live joyfully all the nights which you live. This is the blessing of fire on one who brings him fuel, dry, sought out to burn brightly. So in this temple in Persia, the priest is wearing a mask so that he does not pollute the fire with his breath. On the other end of things, the fire continuity can be considered spiritual continuity can be considered more essential than physical continuity, and many of the Indians of the Eastern United States in particular. But in the Southeast, there's something called the green corn ceremony. All the fires in a village would be put out, and there would be use the occasion to sweep everything clean, and then new fire would be begun from a pure source. The Cherokee green corn ceremony was also practiced by other tribes in the area. So, since we first learned how to create fire, we often vested the acts of lighting and extinguishing it with ritual significance. New fire rituals in which fires are ceremonially extinguished and relit from a pure or sacred source are among the most common customs in the world. Much as eternal flames sacralize an early stage in the development of our species before we learned how to make fire, new fire ceremonies sacralize the next stage when we learned this crucial skill. The degree of emphasis on the physical continuity of eternal flames varies considerably, as we just said before. So, new fire rituals can serve many purposes. They can overlap with the practice of keeping fires lit perpetually. They can represent new commitment to independent adult responsibilities. In some cultures in Asia, a son-in-law would receive a fire from his in-laws, and then it would burn throughout his life. And in other cultures, in the Circassians in particular, it would be the woman who kept a fire going all through her life. And a compliment to a woman recently deceased was she never let her fire go out all her life. Fires were often used to inaugurate the reign of new monarchs in Persia through several dynasties. When a new monarch was crowned, a fire would be set in his honor, and the fire would go with him everywhere he went, and it would be only extinguished when he was extinguished himself, and there was time for a new fire to be built. And certain cultures in Africa had followed similar practice. It can serve as an instrument of political subservience. I'll touch on that a little bit later. And also it can assure the renewal of the world in a grand calendric cycle. As I said, the new fire can overlap with the practice of keeping eternal flames. For the Vestal Virgins kept a symbol of the Roman state burning for 1,000 years, but every year they would actually put the fire out and light it again from a pure source, either from the sun or by friction. And as in many traditions in the Christian traditions that were borrowed from the Romans. In Catholic and some other Western churches, a perpetual flame signaling the real presence of Jesus is kept next to the host of the body of Christ. And it gets extinguished on Good Friday to signify that Christ is gone, and then a new fire is relit 3 days later on the eve of Easter. And the most spectacular form of this tradition takes place in Jerusalem. This is the edicule, and it's inside the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and the building in the middle is called the edicule, and it's built over what is believed to be the place where the tomb of Jesus was entombed. And every year, the archbishop will enter the edicule with two candles or two torches, and it'd be pitch black inside, and he will, after a bit, the blue flame will come from nowhere and supposedly and light these torches, and he'll bring them out and pass them. And this is after the torches have come out and all the believers are circling around. So we're going back a moment here to show the moment where the priest emerges from the edicule bearing the new holy fire. And the fire will be given to representatives of the Coptic Church, the Armenian Church, and the different branches of the Orthodox Church, and then flown to different parts of the world to relight fires in the churches around the world. And here on the right, we have the candles of believers that appear to self-ignite along with the torches that the Archbishop held. So the Inca of Peru had held a new fire ritual in June at the winter solstice. It was known as the Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun. All fires were extinguished for 3 days prior, and the people fasted. Before dawn on the days of the solstice, the full population of Cusco assembled in the great square, awaiting the arrival of Inti, their highest-ranked deity. After joyful ceremonies, when the sun appeared, the Sapa Inca himself led a procession to the Corincanta, the temple of the sun. Most years, the priest sacrificed a llama or two, only on special occasions where they need to sacrifice a young maiden or child. A concave metal mirror focusing the Inti's rays on a bit of cotton created the sacred fire for the coming year. If an overcast face hid the face of Inti, the new fire would still be created using friction, but Inti had signaled poor prospects for the coming year. Now, the most spectacular form of new fire took place every 52 years. In the calendric cycle of the Mexica, there were two calendars that coincided every 52 years. And once again, they would extinguish all fires throughout their growing empire. And all the pots would be broken, and everything would be swept clean, and people would wait breathless anticipation for the priests to, on the top of a mountain south of what is now Mexico City, where they would create new fire. And if the idea was that if they failed to do that, these horrible creatures with like birds, but with the faces of women, would come from the sky and destroy everything, and the sun would not come up. So to keep the sun going up, this had to happen. So they would bore new fire on the breast of a sacrificial victim, create a fire in a brazier, put the body in there, and from the cavity of where his heart had been extracted, runners would, carrying pine knot torches, would light the fire and take it down the hill to the Templo Mayor, and from there the fire would be spread to all the other temples in the kingdom, and then to all the people in the house. And as I said earlier, this was an expression of political subservience. I mean, if you can't light your own fire, and have to get it from somebody else, then you are their vassal in essence. So sometimes fire itself, although fire is the great purifier, sometimes fire itself could be conceived as getting itself impure. And here we have 9 men extracting the sacred living fire in Russia using a giant fire drill. It was usually kindled at times of epidemic. And this need fire would ideally use rope newly woven from strands of a gallows rope. The acts of enemies could also pollute a fire. After the temporarily united Greeks repulsed a Persian invasion at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BCE, they learned from an oracle that the barbarians had polluted their fires. They needed to extinguish all fires and fetch new fire from the public hearth at Delphi, which was a long distance away. So they sent a swift running soldier named Ubiquitous. He ran off to Delphi and came back. It was a journey of 1,000 stadia, and saluting his fellow citizens and delivering them the fire, according to Plutarch, he immediately fell down and in a short time after expired. This event echoes the famous run after the Battle of Marathon, another victory over the Persians that had happened 20 years before. Since 2000, the ubiquitous, an annual ultra race over 4 times longer than a marathon, retraces the route that the Greek soldier Ubiquitous took from Plataea to Delphi and back. So, like the Inca, when Greeks and Romans needed new fire, they would take it from the purest source, the sun, using a bronze mirror device called a scaphia. Every 4 years, in a ceremony marking the start of the Olympic Games, they kindled fire from the sun on the terrestrial Mount Olympus, brought it down the mountain by torch, and lit fires in the temples of Hera and Zeus in nearby Olympia. Since 1928, the modern games have revived this tradition. A runner carries the flame to the nearby monument to the Baron de Coubertin, founder of the modern games, where his heart lies buried. The rest of the good Baron rests in peace in Lausanne. The torch then passes from runner to runner across Greece to Athens, where the host committee of that year's games takes charge. The torch symbolizes the light of spirit, knowledge, and life, while the relay expresses the handing down of this symbolic fire from generation to generation. So we have another example of ancient fires rekindled. As I mentioned earlier, we have the Inca Inti Raymi is now quite a spectacular occasion, attracting many tourists, and that takes place every June at the winter solstice in Cusco. So fire rituals used to be far more common. Stephen Pine is the best-known historian of fire, and he says, as open flame disappeared from daily life, so did the fire ceremonials. And as the Enlightenment spread, few of the educated elite could see any purpose to fires at all. They beheld them as blind superstition and witch burning, not as the rites that evolved out of fire's practical biology, its capacity to purge and promote. Today, when most people in developed nations live in cities, there are few ceremonies of open fire burning left. What once inspired awe now reeks of the quaint and disreputable. Fire rites have shrunk to votive candles and eternal flames over memorials. Now, I take issue with that somewhat. I think Pine is undoubtedly correct in arguing that at least in the developed world, fire rituals have greatly diminished in frequency and importance. Once a Lithuanian farmhouse gains electricity and central heating, its mistress no longer needs to ritually put the fire goddess Gabiya to bed each evening. Most of us now live in apartments or houses built with no provision for open fire besides perhaps a barbecue brazier. If we do live in a house with a traditional fireplace, the fire that seems to glow within may actually derive from gas or electrical effects. If the fireplace can still burn wood, the only ceremony that regularly takes place around it may be the hanging of stockings in hope, with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon will be there. Though millions of homes still do maintain eternal flames of a sort, they no longer form the center of worshipful attention. Instead, they humbly burn out of sight and out of mind in the basement or utility room as pilot lights for furnaces and water heaters. But with all due respect, Professor Fine, something in the human spirit still hungers for ritual. For all the transformations technological change has wrought, the power and appeal of fire as engine of ritual continues undiminished. The British website indigenouspeople.org allows ritual-hungry Europeans to hire Africans to share the fire ceremonies still performed in their cultures. The site encourages interactive synthesis of the imported African tradition with European culture, creating neo-traditional, quote-unquote, ceremonies rather than simply recreating African rituals. Hiring African experts can also help keep their traditional practices from dying out, one of the stated goals of the indigenous peoples, which is a not-for-profit business based in Britain. Not everyone finds it necessary to borrow so heavily from other cultures. The endlessly fecund human imagination continues to spin out new ceremonies and rituals using fire, both secular and religious. On the solstice in 1955, inspired by an epic poem in Catalan, a hiker lit a bonfire atop Canigou, a majestic mountain on the eastern end of the Pyrenees overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. From this event, an annual tradition gradually grew. Starting days before the actual solstice, hikers carry up bundles of wood from their villages, towns, and cities, together with drawings and texts, and stack them around an iron cross on the mountaintop. The night before solstice day, other hikers bring fire up the mountain from a flame burning since 1965 in a medieval fort on the French side of the border. After the reading of a manifesto, they light the bonfire at midnight. Hundreds of torches lit from the bonfire then parade down both sides of the mountain and light over 30,000 bonfires throughout the autonomous community of Catalonia in Spain and the French Département Pyrénées-Orientales. The traditional celebrations that then take place, such as jumping over bonfires, draw from ancient solstice traditions celebrated throughout Europe, named during the Christian era for St. John the Baptist. The main innovations of recent times consist of the overnight torch relay and the political aspect, in which the flama symbolizes the endurance of the Catalan people. Rigorously suppressed during the Franco dictatorship, the ceremony has been performed openly and proudly ever since the reestablishment of Spanish democracy. People in many parts of the world have looked to honor and revive the pagan traditions and practices of their ancestors, long eclipsed and suppressed by dominant Christianity. Both ancient and modern pagan traditions frequently feature fire, since many ancient practices survive only in fragmented records and distorted form by the officials that suppress them. Their revival must remain conjectural and include newly reimagined elements. One modern ritual grew out of a feminist, goddess-centered reconstruction project. The original worship of the ancient Roman goddess Hecate centered on secret mysteries, largely celebrated by women. And of course, since the histories of Rome were all written by the men, these mysteries were not written down, from which no written records survive. But there are hints here and there, and they've managed to recreate a semblance of a Hecate ritual and perform it in many places around the world. So the Unity candle has become a standard option on the menus of wedding planners. Its origins remain obscure. The earliest documented use took place in Illinois in the 1970s. Though details vary, the ceremony usually involves a taper for 3 candles, a taper for each of the 2 participants getting married, and a large pillar candle symbolizing their union. And the new ceremony, focused on an other end of life, honoring those who have died, draws on older Buddhist traditions. The 𝘗𝘩𝘦𝘰𝘳𝘦 fire and water ceremonies, which are large-scale public events that occur annually in Honolulu on Memorial Day, on Qingming, Tomb Sweeping Day, and Taipei, and at the Reflecting Pool in front of New York's Lincoln Center and many other places in different times around the world. Participants write the names of lost loved ones and expressions of love on hand-decorated lanterns made of wood and paper. They then light fires inside the lanterns and set them afloat in large bodies of water. There they drift about, moved by the wind and current, along with hundreds of other lanterns. I've never seen this myself. I hope to someday. It must be quite beautiful. Though we hear a lot about Burning Man here in the Bay Area, that festival is not unique, even in its central event, the burning of a large effigy. The annual fire event at the Woodford Folk Festival down under is one of the most spectacular. The Folk Festival began in 1987, coincidentally the same year that Burning Man began. It begins with a procession of hundreds of paper lanterns created by festival attendees. Next comes a pageant featuring giant puppets with remarkably expressive-looking blinking eyes, and orchestra and chorus numbering in the hundreds and up to, I think, 1,400 participants, mostly volunteer. Each year, the pageant tells a simple story, sometimes spread over multiple years, about the triumph of good over evil, culminating in puppets and scenery going up in spectacular flame. So the Burning Man, after, think about year 2000, after the burning of the actual man itself, the most important burn is that of what's called the Burning Man Temple. For a week, people bring mementos to this wooden structure. Often the first ones were created by what's left over after they make wooden dinosaur kits. So sort of the negative space, you can see the negative spaces of stegosauruses and brontosauruses. But it can be quite tall, 40 feet. This one here, the spire here, is even taller on the right. Every year different. And people bring things that they want to memorialize people. Sometimes they're quite touching. You can see I remember a child had scrawled next to a picture of a dog, "I wish I had played with you more." And then sometimes there'll be a long letter addressed to someone's deceased father, and or a wedding dress, which sort of neatly says something about whatever that person chose to memorialize by burning it. And then, as opposed to the burning of the Burning Man, which is a kind of a spectacular Dionysian affair, everyone, thousands of people surround the temple and watch, more or less in silence. Yeah, here's the burning of the man itself. The fire conclave is the largest collection of fire performers, which do a dance surrounding the central figure of the man, and then the man goes up in spectacular flame. So the element of fire remains our go-to choice when we wish to invest a ritual or ceremony with significance. Whether someone honors loved ones who have died by sending a 𝘗𝘩𝘦𝘰𝘳𝘦 fire basket floating on water, or by watching cherished mementos go up in the Burning Man temple, they choose to mark their grief with fire. Whether a Unitarian Universalist lights a chalice to temporarily enter a sacred space, or a Wiccan lights a candle to cast a spell, humankind's ancient fiery partner makes it bright and clear that Now we take actions with serious intent. And there's more on my website, 𝘗𝘩𝘕𝑚gasperini.com, where I encourage you to go and sign up for my newsletter. I haven't written anything in it for a while. I promise no spam. But this is time for me to stop sharing. And let's see, I need to find the cursor to do that. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jim. There's a lot of ritual there and ceremony. I'm not quite sure. Your distinction between ceremony and ritual was quite interesting, but I'm not quite sure that you carried it through the whole way. That the birthday cake, for example, is it ceremony? Is it ritual? It seemed to be, and then you turned it into one to the other.
Right. Well, what I was trying to illustrate a simple example there of a distinction. That the birthday cake with candles is a ceremony. It honors the birthday person and the fact that a year has gone by. But when the birthday girl, in this case, makes a wish and blows out the candles with the idea that something will happen, that the wish will come true, that fits my definition of ritual because there's an element of efficacy.
Well, ritual is an action then, and ceremony is also an action, but
it's just the distinction I'm making there is between something that's designed to make something happen, or something just to celebrate something or commemorate.
Okay.
So anyone else who would like to ask a question or make a comment, please unmute yourself before you speak. There's not very many of us here, so we don't need to raise our hands.
Oh. I thought it was really good. I see the ceremony is the event, and then the practice of like blowing out the candy and making the wish. That intended action is the ritual part.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how I see it.
Right. You mentioned that are you a burner, Esther? You mentioned that.
No, I've never been to Burning Man or something. I'm just very interested in all festivals. I like to respect all holidays, celebrations, and many of and the little fire rituals and ceremonies that go with the particular holiday, like Kwanzaa, Hannukah, Christmas to a smaller extent.
Oh, there's as I said at the beginning, we've got the Yule log tradition. We have the Advent wreath is leading up to Christmas. We have and the Christmas tree used to be decorated with fire before. Fortunately, we have strings of electric lights that are much less dangerous.
Oh yes, I was exposed to that when I first moved in with my adopted family. And my mom was not happy with the thing. She was worried about my safety. But what kept me safe was I have a fear of flame being near my face, because I had a very negative experience when I was in a foster home back in New Jersey the first 6.5 years. Somebody shoved a lighted candle or a very bright light up in my face, and the flash frightened me.
Fire's danger is always part of its appeal, and it can be a threat. I don't really get too much into the fire danger in my book. My book is mostly about the more positive aspects of our relationship with fire rituals, and fire creatures like the dragons and jinn, and fire mythology. and that sort of thing.
It makes me think of pyromaniacs, and if they have some kind of impulse to create an event similar to a ritual.
That's an interesting thought. I have not thought of that. Yeah, now that you mention it, I don't mention pyromaniacs at all in my book. There's so much that as I began digging into this, 7 or 8 years ago, I realized just how vast the subject is, and I keep everywhere you go, there's fire. It's hard to avoid it. It's just pervades our culture, and in many ways, it shaped us as a species.
I think it's also entered our language. I mean, we talk about people living a very fast, perhaps even creative life, and we say he's burning the candle at both ends.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very much about life, very much akin. I was also struck by a fact I was given at the death of a very dear friend, a spirit lamp, which was to remind me. So again, that whole idea of keeping somebody alive is all part of that.
A spirit lamp, that's not something I'm familiar with. I've heard them, but once again, that's something I really ought to look into, because
yes, indeed.
Yeah, every time I talk about this, somebody comes up with something that I haven't gotten into. I do have a whole chapter actually on fire metaphors and symbolism. But that's a subject for a whole other talk.
Exactly.
More comments? Anybody else? Okay, well, I'm going to stop the recording.
Well, before you do that, Dan, I'm going to extinguish our Agni. I had on my list of things to do to find a suitable excerpt from the Rig Veda to read at this point, but I never got to it, so I'll just say goodbye.
Sufficient ritual for that.